morning, everyone. This is Man Coverage, Knoxville Nate, Mr. James Bonneville. How are you doing today, Mr. James?
Any better be a crime.
I like to hear it. It is May 15, 2022. As I mentioned, this is Man Coverage. We are talking college football today. We're going to break down a little bit about what's going on right now in the NCAA world with the collectives, with the NIL, with all the things happening and being discussed. We're also going to break down today and go in depth on the Clemson Dabo Swinney-led Tigers. Obviously, last year was a disappointment for Clemson. They still won 10 games. So your program's doing pretty damn good if 10-3 is a down year. And we're going to talk about what happened last year and what's going to happen in 2022 based on our thoughts. So first off, I'd like to talk a little bit about, what's happening in the NCAA football world and what's happening with the NIL and what's happening with these collectives that have been formed. This is big news all across the country, all across college football. We've heard the NCAA come out and basically tell the teams that are governed by them that they are not allowed to pay these high school kids to come to these particular schools and to play. Basically, they're trying to prevent the pay for play because we know it's happening. It's always happened. But now, essentially, based on the rules, it's legal, but the NCAA is saying that they're not going to allow it. They've done investigations. They've investigated BYU openly. They've openly investigated Miami. I'm sure they found something, but they didn't do anything. James, what are your thoughts on the collective investigations? Your thoughts on where the NCAA is at right now? And what are your thoughts on where we're going with paying these high school kids to come to individual schools?
Well, obviously the original intent wasn't pay to play, but the NCAA, as usual, was, a little slow to the draw. I mean, it's not like people haven't been telling them for years, even the Supreme Court, you need to do something about this, and they did nothing. And now they're trying to pick up the pieces retroactively. I don't know how they have a case where they could come in and go after somebody retroactively. Now, I mean, there are multiple problems with collectives. I mean, at certain schools, you got competing collectives. There was one tweet I saw from an unnamed coach talking about how that you've got collectives offering money to kids they don't even want. It's you start to wonder who's running what anymore. It's kind of become the wild, wild west, and the coaches they're not really running their programs per se. They're just kind of a participant on the wave that's happening. And I don't know what in the world this is going to look like on the back end.
Yeah, and this is what we talked about from the beginning, that this was going to be the wild, wild west. And what we talked about on this show from the get-go and what we've talked about all along is the NCAA spent so much time, so much money, so much effort fighting the NIL and fighting the transfer portal becoming of age that they didn't really set any groundwork for how it's going to work once it was allowed. And they lost, their battle with the Supreme Court, and basically the NIL was allowed to happen and the transfer portal was opened up. And then there just are no rules governing it. And that's why we keep referring to it as the Wild Wild West, because it's like living in a city back on the Western times where, you had a marshal who you didn't really know who was controlling him. And Doc Holliday kind of rode into town and stole gold and no one gave a crap. And, that's what we're dealing with right now because there really are no rules that anyone's following. And we, this wasn't set up to be a pay for play, but as you mentioned, it's happening. And we know that certain collectives that are run by boosters, that are run by alumni, people with money that are fans basically of these teams. And they're going out, like you mentioned, and sometimes working not in conjunction with the coaches and not in conjunction with the school, but going out in their own interest, finding kids that they want to come to that school and then offering them money to come. And that's a big problem, I think, because as you mentioned, I read that article that you were talking about where a coach said that, the kid came to him and told him that he'd been given money to come to their program, and the coach knew nothing about it.
Yeah.
And if that continues to happen, it's going to be a big problem. And what I think the NCAA is doing right now is they're trying to build some cases where they have some proof that this is going on. They're going to try and issue some sort of statement, some sort of punishment against a school for paying a player to come. And then that player or the school or both are going to sue the NCAA, and the NCAA is going to try and win that case and then have some legal footing to stand on. That's what I think is going on right now, because they issued this, 10 months have been, come and gone, and nothing's really happened. Now they've issued these statements saying that they're not, these schools aren't allowed to do this. If you do it, we're going to put you into a world of hurt. You're going to get in trouble, but nothing's really happened yet. And that is what I believe is going on. Am I right or am I wrong, James?
I would say you're right. I mean, I think the problem you have when you've got a court case like this, if you followed the last dealings with NIL, I mean, that was a 9-0 ruling, and Kavanaugh wrote the opinion basically daring the NCAA to come back to them because they were going to get smacked upside the head. And that they warned them, you've got to do something about this. And the NCAA, as usual, did nothing. So I mean, granted, every case is different, but it would be interesting to see how this one transpires and how they can put this away. I mean, the only way I could see this potentially working, and the universities are going to absolutely hate this because it's going to make players employees, is that they unionize and that you could create some kind of cap per se. But are the universities going to want to consider them employees then? I mean, you're dealing with a whole lot of issues like you're dealing with labor relations issues. You're dealing with liability. There's just a whole host of other things that I know I'm not an expert on, but it becomes much more complicated, and it almost becomes the glorified semi-pro. And do we want college football to become that too as well? I don't know. I mean, honest to God, the next 10 years are going to be very vital to the sport itself to see what happens and what it looks like. I mean, you could see the break off of the Power 5 conferences, or heck, maybe even a bigger divide between Division I, the FBS versus the FCS.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yeah, it is. And, this is something we've talked about for years, and something that we've gone back and forth on, about paying the kids. And, we got a comment here from old Willie O'Meara talking about, he can't believe that they're paying high school players now. Scholarships are used to be what these kids got. And that's what used to be given to these high school kids to entice them to come to these schools. And, I don't think that every single school is paying players to come there. I really don't believe that. I don't believe that every single one is. But I believe it's happening. And as you mentioned, some of these rogue collectives are doing it on their own. But that's not what the NIL was meant for. The NIL was originally designed so that, and we talked about this last week in Coach Stoops' article, where Coach Stoops from Kentucky mentioned that he thought, and that the NIL initially was designed to pay players that have come to a school, taken a scholarship, worked their butt off, helped, improve a program, or, create a program and get it to a point where the program is successful. The program is making money off ticket sales, off beer sales, off of jersey sales, off of TV revenue. And then that player is able to share in that revenue by using their name, image, and likeness throughout that community or throughout the country, whatever. But it wasn't really designed to pay these kids to come to the schools. But, we've known this forever. Back, 20 years ago, 50 years ago, the Pony Express and SMU and
heck, the whole Southwest Conference during that era. I mean, that was the era of Dallas on TV. I mean, where games were won. I mean, you had high schools, boosters that had high schools that were sending kids to specific high schools. I mean, heck, Eric Dickerson still talks about what he got from Texas A&M what was it, a Corvette? And and
I
he
think it
ended
was
up
a
still not
Trans
Trans Am. That's right.
Yeah.
I mean that 30 for 30 they did on SMU was unbelievable. And if people never got a chance to see those SMU teams, they were special in a time where the Southwest Conference was, I mean, an unbelievable conference. I mean, Lou Holtz was at Arkansas and had them rolling. I mean, he had one bad year where he went 6-5 in 1983 and got fired.
Yeah.
And this guy was always top 3 in the Southwest Conference, traditionally playing on January 1st bowl games.
Yeah, well, he left after he got fired and went and won a national championship at Notre Dame.
In 5 years.
5 years later. So,
Yeah.
that's telling you right now what was going on back then. But, this has been happening for a long time. These kids have been getting paid to come to schools. And I think, that's not good for college football. I mean, that creates what we talked about, which we didn't want, which was certain schools being number 1, being number 2 every single year. There's no parity. Schools that have the most money keep winning and keep going on winning. And that's not what we want. We want parity. We want schools to be able to have a firm groundwork, be able to lay a firm groundwork to build their program based upon a good coach, based on getting good players and not having just to pay for kids coming there. And I'm all for these kids getting money, but I think that just paying them to come to a specific school is not good. I think it's not good for college football. I don't think it's good for the kid. Let's talk about this for 1 second. The NFL draft essentially is a 50% miss rate. Talking about first round in the NFL draft. If you go back through the history of it, 50% of the players that are drafted in the first round don't make it to their second contract. Might even be a little bit higher than that. So if you're talking about kids that have played 2, 3, 4 years in college, not being able to evaluate whether they're going to have success at a professional level, what do you think the hit rate is for high school players going to college? I mean, it can't be anywhere near that 50%. And so if you're paying these kids to go to a college, sometimes you're going to be wasting money because these kids aren't going to pan out.
Well, I mean, think about how much your body changed and developed, not only between your high school years from you were 14 to 18, but then think from 18 to 23. Say you take that red shirt in there too as well. I mean, heck, you've seen players go from being scrawny to being really, really big. And because, I mean, you're getting the best professional strength and conditioning money can buy. I mean, they're tracking everything that's going in your body, and they are seeing the output come from that too as well. And I mean, you see guys, I mean, there are so many players. Go back. I still have athlons from like the 1980s, 1990s. There's names on there that are very high rated guys that I never heard of, either because of injury or they just didn't pan out. I mean, these things happen time and time again. It's not like you always see 5-star guys be the first round draft picks.
No, I mean, and I looked this up a little while ago. I was doing some research about, what type of recruits ended up having, what type of star recruits ended up having success in the NFL. And I went back and found this article. I believe it was from around 2016, I believe. And this was the 2016 Pro Bowl. 37 of the players there were 3-star recruits or worse. And these names are going to be pretty alarming. Aaron Rodgers was a 3-star recruit. Dak Prescott was a 3-star.
Honestly, I don't think Aaron Rodgers was even a 3-star recruit.
Remember, this means this is 3-star or worse.
Oh, okay, or worse. Yeah.
Worse. This is 3-star or worse. Sorry, I didn't phrase it right. But yeah, this is 3-star or worse. Matt Ryan, Le'Veon Bell, Mike Evans, Brandon Sheriff, David DeCastro, Travis Frederick, Trent Williams, Travis Kelce, Casey Hayward, Marcus Peters, Richard Sherman, Brian Arakpo, Luke Kuechly, Vic Beasley, Von Miller, Marshall Yanda, Aaron Donald, Geno Atkins, Cliff Averill, Jarrell Casey, Justin Tucker. The name goes on and on. Actually, those are 3 stars. Those that said that Aaron Rodgers was a 3-star. 2-star recruits Ty Hilton, Aqib Talib, Khalil Mack was a 2-star, obviously went on to Buffalo. Bobby Wagner, who's a Hall of Famer, was a 2-star that went to Utah State. And then no-star recruit, Tom Brady was no stars. Ben Roethlisberger, Antonio Brown, Kyle Juszczyk, Mike Tolbert, Delaney Walker. I mean, the list goes on and on with guys who had no stars that went on. So my point is, and the only reason I was reading that article was that there's kids that, aren't even recruited that go on and have huge NFL careers. And there's kids that are 5-stars that never can even get on the field. So paying these kids out of high school is just wrong. It's like gambling, essentially. And we all know when you go to Vegas, they didn't build all those buildings and put up all those lights for people that are winning at the gambling tables.
Yeah.
That's just not how it works. The house usually wins. And I just don't think it's a good precedent to pay these kids that have never done anything for the game of college football to come and play it. I don't know, James. That's just my thought. What do you think about all of this?
I'm still up in the air on this one where, I can see the downside of it, but the problem is it becomes an arms race, and the ones that have the most arms usually wins. And that becomes a problem, because if you're a school that, heck, the Boise States of the world, heck, even if they develop somebody, what's the odds they keep that guy?
Yeah,
probably not much, because if it comes down to cash, the kid's gone. But once the kid makes, hearing some of these these numbers coming out, like Jordan Addison's number,
yeah,
you may be making more money in college than you would in the pros.
Oh yeah, it's definitely true. And we got a question here from one of our viewers. Would you privately invest money in an NIL collective group that was a player incubator based in zip codes from a prominent number of pros? I don't know. I don't know what to do. I can tell you I can tell you right now that if you don't have a collective set up, you're falling behind in college football.
Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely.
That's one thing I can tell you, because look at Texas. Look at Texas A&M. They got ahead of this, and they went out and got their collective set up. They got their boosters to pool money, and look at the recruiting classes that they pulled. Look at the transfers that they pulled, because they were giving these guys either money up front, I don't know, or they were giving them the ability to make money when they got there. Don't you think that's the case?
Oh, the Jimbo was so far ahead of the game on this one, it wasn't even funny. Getting the boosters to get invested that much into it. Here, what about this question?
Yeah, an NIL incubator that invests in kids' zip codes from birth, food programs, tutor programs, strength and conditioning. Hey, that's kind of where we're heading, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Thank you for the questions and the comments, because it may sound far-fetched to some people, but that's really, really where we're headed. And we talk about we're going to get into Clemson here in a minute, and we're going to break down some of their recruits and some of their players. Well, their quarterback that they got, Cade Klubnik, is from Westlake High School in Austin, Texas. As we know, and everyone knows, or if you don't know, I'll tell you right now, that's where Drew Brees came from. That's where Nick Foles came from. That's where, give me another one.
Sam Ellinger, come on, little gun
Ellinger.
shooter, ding, ding, ding.
Thank you. They've had several guys.
Because Texas is back.
Yeah.
Texas is back, according to
Sam. We'll see about that. But that's what that's a place where kids come from, and that's what Jimmy's talking about. We could go and just set up a collective where we pay whoever the hell is the quarterback from Westlake to come directly to Texas and give him money in high school. And right now that's not allowed, because you can't pay kids in high school in Texas. And that's where we saw the Quinn Ewers example, where he quit his high school team, didn't play his senior year, moved to Columbus, sat on the bench at Ohio State, and made $1 million. So Jimmy says he'll take the 305. Where is the 305? I don't even know.
I'm guessing 305 has got to be south.
Miami, Florida.
Miami, Florida. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Yeah. That would be a good. Yeah. 305.
Yeah, there's as Will says, there really is always a better team that is able to pay you more than you. Yeah, no, there
Well,
is.
absolutely.
Yeah, we've seen it. I mean, Texas A&M, they've got a huge alumni and booster group that has always supported the program and that has always taken care of business off the field for the Aggies. And look what they were able to do. And as you said, you got to give Jimbo Fisher credit because he was ahead of the game on this. And he's taken some hits. There's been some people that have said he's basically just paying guys to come. He was, they've said that he was doing that at Florida State, that he paid Jameis to come there, that he paid some of those other kids that were on that national championship team to play, Jalen Ramsey and other players of that caliber to come to Florida State. So, that's been going on for years. And the question is, should we allow this? Should this be allowed to pay these kids to come? I don't know. I don't know whether or not that's a good idea. I really don't. I think that these kids should be allowed to make money. I think they should be allowed to profit off their NIL, their name, image, and likeness once they've gotten to college and actually helped a program out. But just paying them to come to a school, I think, opens up a big can of worms. But really right now, there's no way to police it, James.
Oh, it's the Wild West. Absolutely.
There's no way.
I mean, this is like the old Southwest Conference just out in the open rather than the Texas Dallas boardrooms. So
yeah. I mean, there's no with the rulings that occurred from the Supreme Court that now these kids can essentially make money when they're still considered an amateur athlete. There really isn't any amateur athletes anymore, but still considered being an amateur athlete. They're still allowed to make money. There's really no way to police it because you can say, you're not allowed to pay for this kid to come here, but there's really there's ways to hide how you're paying the kid. You can say, well, we're bringing him into our NIL group where once he's a member of our team, he gets this amount of money to help him via the NIL or however they want to phrase it. They can, word the contracts, and they're hiring attorneys left and right. And everybody hates attorneys until they need one. And if you got a good attorney, there's ways to write these contracts up where it looks like he's just getting paid to be a player on this team, that you're not really paying him to come there. But we all know that that may not always be the case, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You can say that again.
So we'll see how this plays out. It's definitely very interesting. It's definitely something that we're going to talk a lot about on this show. We appreciate everybody tuning in, and please continue to give us your comments because we want to know what everybody thinks. Me and James were in favor, both of us, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, James, but me and you both were in favor of opening up the transfer portal. We think
agreed.
These coaches can go wherever the hell they want. They make all the money now. You talk about these kids making this $1 million or a kid making $1 million here, $1 million there. Well, those are just the high-end players. The other players aren't making that. These coaches are the guys that are making the big buku bucks. I mean, Ryan Day makes $8 million or more. Jim Harbaugh makes $9 million. Nick Saban makes over $10 million.
Jeff Brom makes what, $8-9 million a year?
Yes, and that's something that we're going to talk about too. Is the top college coaches' salaries? I mean, that's kind of where this is stemming from. Is you were always saying, well, where's this money going to come from? Well, these coaches make so much that the money's there. I mean, the college football is definitely making enough money. I mean, talk about Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern. Not a powerhouse blue chip program, but Pat Fitzgerald has been the coach there for what, 15 years
at least,
or more, at least, and he's done a very good job. Well, he's been paid handsomely for it. He makes almost $5.8 million. Steve Sarkisian at Texas makes $6 million just from his salary, not to mention all the other money he makes. Talk about Dan Mullen, who was let's be honest, a disaster at the University of Florida. He was making almost $8 million a year. Ed Orgeron was making over $9 million. So, these salaries are ridiculous. Ryan Day makes almost $7 million. James Franklin makes over $7 million. As I mentioned, Jim Harbaugh, Kirby Smart makes over $8 million. Lane Kiffin makes over $7 million at Ole Miss. Jimbo Fisher, $8 million. Mario Cristobal got paid over $8 million to work at Miami and to switch from Oregon. Dabo Swinney makes $8.4 million. David Shaw at Stanford makes $9 million a year. I mean, that one blew me away because I never really realized that he made that much. We got another question here, which is asking, did Dylan Raiola get paid to come to Ohio State? The answer is we don't really know. Nobody really knows. Now, there hasn't been a deal reported for him. There's been no NIL deal that has come out saying that Dylan Raiola got paid to go to Ohio State. Now, will he get paid from the collective once he gets there? Definitely. There's a collective that was set up by the Schottenstein family and is spearheaded by Cardale Jones, the former quarterback who won the national championship. It's becoming one of the bigger collectives in the country. And, that's obviously probably something that, led to Dylan Raiola making the decision to go to Ohio State. Don't you think, James?
I not only that, but I think you've seen this pipeline of specific types of quarterbacks going to Ohio State since Ryan Day has come in. I mean, going back from Haskins through Fields, through Stroud, there's a similarity in style and structure of how they throw the ball, and you could see with Raiola is the same process. There's a certain type of body type he's looking for, kind of like what Matt Rule did at Baylor. He was strictly looking at body type, and he can turn them into a different position if he needed to be, but he wanted them fast and sleek. And you look at what, Ohio State's doing. Yeah, they could run. Stroud can run. Fields could run, but they like sitting back and being generals, the old school 1980s generals, and really surveying the field.
Yeah, I mean, C.J. Stroud was criticized some last year for not running. And, that was some of the criticism he took. But let's be honest, the guy finished, third in the Heisman?
Yeah.
And is projected to win the Heisman and be a number one draft pick next year. So he had a pretty good season. And as you mentioned, I think when we're talking about Dylan Raiola here, based on Will's question, I think a lot of things went into the decision to him to go to Ohio State. I think he's seen the success that the Ohio State offense has had. I mean, think about it. Last year, Ohio State was the number one offense in the country. C.J. Stroud stepped in as a first-year starter and had those crazy numbers. Look at the receivers that Brian Hartline and Ryan Day have put together in the Ohio State offense. Jackson Smith and Jigba, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Williams Jr., Ibuka. I mean, the Julian Fleming, the list goes on and on and on. And so there's those weapons there. There's the system that is there. And the system has set these quarterbacks up for success. If you go back to when Urban Meyer took over as the coach and he stepped in and created his offensive scheme, the quarterbacks have all flourished, from Braxton Miller, J.T. Barrett, Cardale Jones. It didn't really matter who the quarterback was.
You've got a different offensive set now under Urban,
under
Day than you did under Urban. I mean,
no, that's definitely true. I'm just saying that since Urban Meyer's taken over, all of the quarterbacks at Ohio State have all had success at the college level. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I would agree with that. Now, I think one thing not to put in perspective too, and I think this goes beyond Raiola, Stroud, Bryce Young, and a guy we're going to be talking about a little later on with DJU, is the downfall of the Pac-12. I mean, you're seeing many, many kids. I mean, this is a bumper crop of kids coming out of states like Arizona, who's, becoming a factory of quarterbacks. There's a quarterback whisperer that's doing a phenomenal job down there. Plus, look at what's going on in Southern California alone. I mean, heck, you had 3 kids in the same class that'll probably get drafted in the first round. But they're not staying at Pac-12 schools. Trying to bring back the Pac-12 to some semblance of what it was. And that means we need Kalen DeBoer to bring back Washington to be that offensive powerhouse. Oregon, obviously you look at what Cristobal did. He was going to be really good on the defensive side and really strong in the offensive line, but they weren't really what they were under Kelly or even going at the Bellotti. I mean, they kind of stagnated offensively and played kind of this 1980s, early 1990s football. I hope Lanning can change that thought process. We need Stanford back. It's not good offense overall, and people tend to not want to watch it. But at the end of the day, you need USC to be a good program. If without USC, there's really nothing there in the Pac-12. There's nothing to draw you there. They are the helmet school in that conference.
That's true, and I think Lincoln Riley will help turn that program around. It's not like they haven't been trying, James. I mean, they've brought in Lane Kiffin, they brought in Sarkisian, they brought in Helton. I mean, they've been changing coaches every few years. They've been switching coordinators. They've been getting recruits that they think are viable. I mean, it's not like they haven't been trying out there in Trojan land. It just hasn't been working.
But they've been running the same offense dating back to John Robinson. I mean,
pretty much
old school pro style under center, and I can tell you right now, Lincoln Riley ain't going to do that. I mean,
no. I think he brought his quarterback. He brought his quarterback with him. He brought his one of his receivers with him, and he brought his offense with him. So we're gonna see their offense and see if it works out in the Pac-12, and I think it will. I think they're going to have success. I think they're not going to win. I don't see them competing for a national championship this year, but they are going to. They're going to bring their system with them, and they're going to see what they can do. And
I can see how the alumni. I could see how their alumni, if they don't by year 4 make the CFP, there's going to be hell to pay.
Oh yeah. He was brought in to win a national championship. There's no doubt. They've won 9-10 games. Jimmy thinks they're going to run the veer. They might. I think the system that Oklahoma has had in place for years has been successful. I mean, think about the different quarterbacks they've had: Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Jalen Hurts, Spencer Rattler, Caleb Williams. I mean, it's like Ryan Day's system. It works in college football. These are guys that are very, very innovative as far as their minds go, as far as offense goes. And as long as they get somebody that's got some arm talent and has decent legs, they can make it work. And it's been working. And that's why, going back to the original question, Dylan Raiola wants to be successful. He wants to, have a system that's in place where he can thrive, and that's there at Ohio State right now. As we mentioned, Urban Meyer's come and gone. His offense is kind of come and gone. As you mentioned, the offense has changed, and it's become more prolific. These quarterbacks are, getting drafted now. I mean, you think about, JT Barrett, Cardale Jones, both late draft picks because they were college quarterbacks. Well, now you've got guys that C.J. Stroud, Justin Fields. These guys are potential NFL quarterbacks because they can throw it, they can read defenses, they can do things, and they're not just playing the zone read, which is what Urban Meyer's system was largely.
Well, all you had to do under Urban's offense was read 2 different guys, depending on the play. Yeah, that was it. Where Stroud honestly has. I mean, you look at him and Bryce Young, they have. I mean, they could come in and probably play in an NFL offense today. They just understand the game so well. They could literally be on the headset and play the game. They're mature beyond their years. I mean, heck, the game against Utah in the Rose Bowl said more about Stroud. When you look at how many people Ohio State had out, and still came back and won that game. I mean, that's a testament to Stroud.
No, that's it's a testament to Ryan Day's offense because if you talk about for a second, who didn't play in that game. I mean, think about it. Ohio State was playing Utah, which was in my opinion, Utah's a very good team. And Chris Olave,
absolutely.
Garrett Wilson, who was drafted, number 10 overall to the New York Jets, he did not play. Chris Olave, who was drafted number 11, did not play. And the offense didn't drop off at all. C.J. Stroud was 37 of 46 for 573 yards, 6 touchdowns. Jackson Smith and Jigba had 15 catches for 347 and 3 touchdowns. Marvin Harrison Jr., who had essentially been the 4th wide receiver all year, had 3 touchdowns. I mean, that right there is a testament to this offense, to Ryan Day, and as you mentioned, to CJ Stroud and how good they are.
Yeah.
So we're going to see how that works in the fall. But right now, we're going to break down Ohio State as we get going. They're obviously in contention for the college football playoff once again.
They
We're
are?
going to get yes, they are. They are. They are. I can see that.
You're pulling my
them,
leg now.
I can see them winning it all, and I hope they do, because as everyone knows, I am a Buckeye fan, so I hope they do. And I hope the Pac-12 continues to suck, in my opinion, because I want them to keep sending their players to Columbus. So I don't want USC to be good. I don't want Washington to come back. I don't want any of that. I want Ohio State to keep getting all those guys and to keep being good. But we'll see what happens. But I do want to talk for a minute about our topic for today and something that we were going to break down, and that is the Clemson Tigers. Clemson last year, obviously not what they're used to overall with the Dabo Swinney era. They have been tearing it up since he took over as head coach. I mean, let's just be honest. They've been competing for national championships every single year since he got there, and that's what their fans have come to expect. And that's just the way of the world right now for Clemson football. They're expected to win a national championship, and anything less than that is a failure. Now, they did go 10-3, and as we mentioned at the top of the program, if you can go 10-3 and have a bad year, you're doing pretty good. But there were some things that were alarming throughout last season, in my opinion, in 2021. Simply their dominance in the ACC was concerning to me because it wasn't there anymore. They went 6-2 in the ACC, but they lost some games that they normally would not have any business losing. They also were in some very close games that normally wouldn't occur in 2021, and that was because of their offensive system not working. And we'll get into this, James. I want to hear your thoughts on why their offense was not the same that it's been. Obviously, Trevor Lawrence was gone, but we saw DJU last year play when Trevor Lawrence was hurt and the offense not drop off very much. Now, obviously, Venables was still there, and so that defense was still there. And even though the offense struggled, the defense kept them in some games that they shouldn't have been in. And that's not going to be there this year because Venables is gone. What was your thoughts on Clemson's season last year? Them, the way they started the season, the way they progressed throughout the season, and the way they finished it.
Well, that's a tough question. It's not as open and shut. I have never been a big fan of Clemson's offensive line. Since Dabo has come to the program, they've only had 5 guys drafted total from their offensive line, which is remarkable considering how many years they were contending for a national title during Taj Boyd, Trevor Lawrence, Deshaun Watson. Keep going on. The program just kept humming along. And you would think with all the great defensive lines they went up against, they should be putting at least 1-2 a year into the NFL. I mean, the highest one they got drafted was just, a year or 2 ago? The Jackson, what was his name? Jackson Comer. This is escaping me for 1 second here. Bear with me here. Jackson Carman, tackle, went in the second round to Cincinnati. Other than that, you saw linebackers, 4th round or more. How often do you see that happen? And last year, it was very apparent. I mean, DJU was getting knocked off the ball constantly. Running game, Will Shipley had, 700 yards total offense?
700.
And you look at his style of play, it's very similar to the Travis Etienne, the Andre Ellington, the Wayne Gallman style. They're taller, they're longer, sleeker. But you got to give them something to work with because the first thing they get, if the first contact they're getting is behind the line of scrimmage, they're in trouble. Another thing that I think a lot of people don't realize is they really did not have that guy at the slot.
Yeah.
Like last year, they had Amari Rodgers, who, quite frankly, I thought he was undervalued. I thought so many people were looking towards T. Higgins or Justin Ross pre-injury, and Amari Rodgers was kind of like the third stooge.
Yeah.
Nobody can remember his name. They can remember Larry and Mo. They couldn't remember Amari Rodgers' name. And he had phenomenal stats. And I really am high in him next year in Green Bay now that Adams has moved on to Vegas. I mean, before that, you had Hunter Renfrow, and look what he's doing in the NFL. I mean, the guy is just instant catches. Jordan Leggett. I mean, there was always that guy that could find that little seam, lay down, and get that catch from Watson, from Lawrence, to break up that zone, to make them play the sideline to sideline rather than just playing the boundaries with their big long receivers. I mean,
and in only 12 games, because 2020 obviously, they only played in 12 total games.
Yeah.
Amari Rodgers had 77 catches, over 1,000 yards, 7 touchdowns. He averaged over 13 yards a catch. And also they handed the ball to him. They flipped it to him. They handed it to him on reverses, whatever it was. That guy was a big part of their offense. And like you mentioned, he didn't get all the fanfare throughout the season. But at the end of the year, the Packers sure took notice because they picked him in the second round. And essentially, they're going to be counting on him to produce this year for Aaron Rodgers.
I mean, personally, you look back through Dabo's entire career, I would put Rodgers probably third, a close third in the best receivers during that program, during his era of the program. I mean, obviously, you got to put Sammy Watkins number one because Sammy Watkins was a difference maker. But DeAndre Hopkins and Amari Rodgers, I mean, I would slightly give Hopkins an edge, but I think Hopkins gets that edge because recency bias of what I've seen in the NFL too. I mean, Amari Rodgers was very underrated. People didn't give him near the credit, and that slot position in that Clemson offense is big. And now you lose Brent Venables. I mean, the strength of that defense was that defensive line. I mean, go back. It's ridiculous how many people they have put into the NFL. I bet you it's close to, of the 74 people, I bet you 20 to 25 come from the defensive line. It's a ridiculous number. I mean, heck, they had 5-1 draft of which 3 in the first round. I mean, that was crazy. That was insane. I have never seen anything like that. That was the 19 draft. You had Cleveland Florell go number 4 to Oakland. You had Christian Wilkins go 13 to Miami. You had Dexter Lawrence go 17 to the Giants. You had Austin Bryant go in the 4th round to Detroit. I mean, what a lineup. I mean, that's like murderer's freaking row right there. And then you lose.
And then you got to think that it was the same draft that produced Quinnen Williams and picked and Nick Bosa. And, there was a lot of really talented defensive linemen in that draft. And just thinking about all the Clemson players that went, it's crazy to me. And to have that many guys go in the first and second round, and then to still have success the following year, I think says a lot about Coach Venables. And I think he's going to be lost this year. Look back, and I just want to talk about this for 1 second. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's all good.
But I just wanted to talk about one thing, and this is what we started this whole conversation on, was the season last year. They started off losing 10-3 to Georgia. Now, don't get me wrong. That is one of the best defenses of all time as far as Georgia's defense goes. Maybe didn't even realize it at the time, but as the year went along, we realized that Georgia's defense was unbelievable, and losing to them 10-3, not that big of a deal, but still only being able to put 3 points on the board against Georgia was very alarming. And the trend continued. I mean, you talk about 2 weeks later, Georgia Tech, they won that game, but it was 14-8. The week after, they lost to NC State in 2 overtimes and, only put up 21 points. And that's where you're starting from the 20 there in those 2 overtimes. So that's where a lot of those points were made. The week after that, they beat Boston College. but only scored 19 points. They won 19-13. The week after that, they played Syracuse and easily could have lost that game. They were losing into the fourth quarter and ended up winning 17-14. More, in my opinion, due to the failures of Syracuse, not to the successes of Clemson. The week after that, they lost to Pittsburgh and only scored 17 points. So my point is that offense struggled all year, and their defense kept them into the games that they were in, and it saved them in the games that they won by those slow margins. And now Venables is gone. What do you think the effect of Venables going to Oklahoma as their head coach? That guy's been with Dabo for 10 years. He's gone. What happens?
Well, I mean, you still got Miles Murphy there. You still got Brian Breeze there. I mean, the defensive line is still solid. But you lose James Skalski, who, for what, he may be limited on ability, but that guy was a coach out there. I mean, the kid, it will not shock me he plays on Sundays, even though he did not get drafted during the draft. If not, I wouldn't be a bit surprised he sits on some sideline in the very near future in Clemson, South Carolina, because he did a phenomenal job during his time period there. It felt like he was on the Christian Laettner plan. I swear to God, he has been playing Mike linebacker for them for like the last decade, it seems like. He must have wife and kids that go to school there now too. So, I mean, it's been so long that he's been there. But, I don't know what, they'll be fine on that up front. And I think they can get through it this year. My fear factor is year 2 and 3 because Wes Goodwin's got his work cut out for him. And he and Mickey Kahn have taken over from Venables. And you look back at Venables' time, not only through Clemson, but go back to his Oklahoma days. Luther McCoy, Tommy Harris. I mean, if you want to go back and look at Tommy Harris was a wrecking ball at Oklahoma during his time there.
Definitely one of the best defensive tackles that I've seen play in the last 10, 15 years. I mean, that guy was phenomenal and had an amazing NFL career for the Bears till injuries kind of took him out of it. But that guy was unbelievable. And Venables, whether you hate Clemson like Jimmy does or not, you can't tell me that Venables hasn't done a tremendous job and has been crucial to the success of Clemson football. And now he's gone. And that, to me, worries me. Now, we've seen other programs. Alabama is a great example. They have different coordinators every year because they win the national championship or they lose the national championship game, whatever it may be. And then their coordinators are plucked away. But Nick Saban's able to overcome that time and time again. Well, really, Clemson hasn't had too much of coordinator shuffling. Now, Price left and became a head coach, their offensive coordinator. They've had some movement there, but pretty much since he's been at the helm at Clemson, Venables has been next to him running that defense.
Well, not quite. There was somebody before that people forget about. That was none other. I'm just making sure. Yeah, I was right. Kevin Steele, the old Auburn coordinator, was the coordinator at Dabo for early Dabo. Now, you're going to see Kevin Steele on the sidelines this year in Miami for Cristobal, and I think they're going to do pretty well. But, I mean, Kevin Steele, he had his ups and downs, that's for sure. I mean, you look at his time in Auburn, I think he did a phenomenal job, though, especially with that defensive line. Wouldn't you say, Nate?
No, he's a good defensive coordinator. The guy's coached everywhere. I mean, he's been here at Tennessee several different times. In fact, he was the interim coach after Jeremy Pruitt was gone. They hired him as the interim coach for like a couple months. I think he made like $600,000 to be the interim coach for 2 months, and then as soon as
what a great job.
Yeah, 2 months. He basically did nothing, and then was sent packing as soon as the new regime came in, and they paid him $650,000 to go away. And then Auburn last year. I mean, remember after what was his name? Gus. The Gus bus rolled out of town. They want a lot of the Auburn. He's got some nude photos of somebody down in Auburn because they love him down there, and. They wanted a lot of the brass, a lot of the people running the Auburn collective wanted Kevin Steele to be their head coach and didn't want Brian Harsin to be their head coach. And, when all this was going on about, Harsin last year when they had the meetings or this year, that we talked about where they're trying to get rid of him, Steele's name surfaced again about potentially taking over for him. And, he's a good coach, though. Honestly, I think he is a good coordinator.
Okay. But as a coordinator, I agree.
Yes,
but I mean, people forget he has been a head coach before at Baylor.
Yeah, 9-37.
Yeah, yeah.
I remember those numbers.
He was not good. Like, he was really bad. But the coach they brought in afterwards ended up being pretty good. Granted, he got run off, but he did bring back Baylor to respectability. So,
yeah, well, we'll see what happens. I mean, honestly, my whole point was that Venables has been there for a long period of time. He's been a stable force, and last year is mainly what I'm focusing on right now. His defense brought it, and even when that offense struggled, that defense came to play no matter what. And
Breeze and Murphy are top 10 picks next year's draft, no questions asked. I mean, they're unbelievable talent. But I think the real key, and I think I want to hear your part on this, is does DJU keep his job, or do they go with the 5-star freshman out of Texas, out of Westlake, Austin? You talk to me about him.
Well, I think that DJU starts the season, but I don't think he finishes. I mean, let's talk about it. He got 13 starts last year. He was 208 of 374, 55% completion passes, only threw for 2,200 yards. My biggest stat that I keep looking at is that he only had 9 touchdowns and he had 10 interceptions. That's not going to cut it, and that's not going to cut it at all. And I think part of that was due to, I think, as you mentioned, and we talked about, the receivers took a step back, but also he looked lost at times. If the first read wasn't there, he had no clue what to do with the football. And a lot of times he took off. And we talk about his passing stats there. Well, his rushing stats were pretty good. He had 105 carries for 465, and 4 touchdowns rushing. Well, and those weren't designed runs, James. They're not. Those were when the first read wasn't there and DJU took off, because he just wasn't going through his progressions very good. And, I think that they're going to give him a shot. I think they're going to start him at the beginning of the season. I think he's going to be their quarterback on day one, but I think he's going to have some competition. And, we watch him here. Look at that pass. That was not good. This is the spring game tape that we're looking at with him. I mean, he doesn't look to me like, I watch CJ Stroud. I watch the kid at Alabama, and I watch DJU, and that pass there, that guy was wide open. And so what you got then is this kid, Klublik, who is a 5-star, who has, had scholarships to every school in the country. I think he's got more as far as quarterback skills go than DJU does. And I just think that throughout the season, as it unfolds, I think this kid is going to take the job. Watch this kid here in high school. He can throw the ball. There's no doubt about it. He played big time football. I mean, here he is playing a high school football game in the Jerry Dome in Dallas. I mean, this kid knows what he's doing. He's played in big time games. I think the only reason that he doesn't start day one is because their, loyalty to DJU. I mean, if you think back to a couple of years ago when Kelly Bryant was the starter, Kelly Bryant was 13-2 his first year, and then started the next year 4-0 as the starter. And then they took him out, even though he hadn't lost a game. They didn't like the way that it looked, and they replaced him and put Trevor Lawrence in. I think you're going to see the exact same thing happen this year, because I believe that this kid is the real deal. I think Dabo was all in on this kid, and I think that their program is all in on this kid, because they cannot have another season on offense like they had last year, especially with Venables gone. Am I wrong?
I don't know if I'd go that far yet. I mean, the one thing to look at, though, is DJU is not what Clemson typically has had. You look at back at Taj Boyd, Deshaun Watson, Trevor Lawrence. They were really fleet of foot. I mean, obviously, people probably didn't say it as much with Trevor Lawrence, but go back and watch that long touchdown run he had in the national semis against Ohio State.
Yeah,
It
I
was like
remember that one.
75 yards.
Yeah, I
I
remember it.
mean, I didn't realize he was that fast. He's pretty. I mean, I heard that the 40 times he timed out better than Watson and Boyd, which I still struggle to see because he never truly showed he was more of a long gate guy. DJU is not a runner. He's a plotter. He'll have to do it if he needs to, but he naturally wants to sit back, grow, roots, and throw the ball. If he still looks shaken up and they don't find that slot game, yeah, I could see him getting pulled. But in the meantime, I mean, I've seen his game where, go back to 2020 when they played against Notre Dame. That was phenomenal. I mean, he looked like I walked out of that game thinking this kid's got first pick in the draft capabilities.
I agree.
I was blown away by the kid.
I agree.
But yeah, I need to see more, and I think it's just all confidence right now.
I think his confidence is hurt, and and that 2020 team isn't there anymore. That's my whole point. That 2020 team, I could have been the quarterback of that team and had some success because they were loaded all over, and a lot of those guys are gone. And my point is that offense isn't the same. The offensive line is not even close to as dominant, and they're going to need somebody that can run it, that can throw it, that can create plays. And I just don't see DJU. If you go back and watch the tape last year, as I mentioned and I talked about earlier, a lot of those games, it just did not look good. Georgia did not look good. He was horrible in that game. Now, granted, Georgia's a very good defense.
Yeah.
Georgia's, one of the best defenses of all times. But in that game, DJU was 19 of 37, 170 yards, and an interception. He had a QBR of 42.8.
Those numbers were actually better than I thought he played.
Yeah, exactly.
Honestly, I thought it was much worse. Like, it never felt like, for a game that's 10-3, it felt more like 45-0.
Well, and a lot of those yards were later. After the game was pretty much over. But you talk about even the Syracuse game that they won 17-14. He did not look good in that game.
No.
He was 21 of 34, 180 yards. Those are pedestrian numbers against a not good Syracuse team. Syracuse was 3-4 or 3-3 at the time. It wasn't like they were playing a really good team. Syracuse was not great last year, and he struggled in that game. Talk to me about what was the other game? The Pittsburgh game, where they lost 27-17. He did not look good in that game either. In fact, that was probably his worst game all year. He was 12 of 25 for 120 yards, 2 interceptions, a QBR of 35. That was the game I point to where I say he's donezo, because I go back and I watched that Pittsburgh game, and it was just hard to watch. And he ended up getting replaced later in the game, but it was after it was already over. And I'm telling you that if he doesn't get a lot better, he's going to be yanked, because Dabo's proven it before that he doesn't care who the hell you are. Kelly Bryant was 18-2, and he yanked his ass.
2 names to think about, okay? And I'm not saying you're not wrong. You're not right. I'm not at all. But what about, remember Joe Burrow 2018? How about remember Kenny Pickett 2020 or 2019? You saw 2 quarterbacks that were okay. Just okay. Nothing great. Interceptions pretty high. Sure, they had a live arm, but you didn't know where the hell it was going to go. All of a sudden this year, 2019, it all came together for Joe Burrow. In 2021, it all came together for Kenny Pickett. The ability's there. It's now really, can he get in the right mindset to put it all together? I think he can. And for that to happen, I think Joseph Nagata has got to really step up for him and really be a force. They need to find that slot guy. and let Breeze and Murphy just go nuts, and they can win the ACC. I mean, honestly, Wake Forest is going to be tough. You're going to see. I mean, it just seems like they've got a billion. I mean, Wake Forest. It seems like the guys are like 26 before they graduate from Wake Forest nowadays. NC State and Doran's really upping the program.
Yeah.
But there's still that ability where Clemson can come in and win the ACC.
I think Florida State will be better.
Yeah, I do too.
I saw some things out of them towards the end of the season that led me to believe they might be heading in the right direction. I think Miami's going to be better.
Yeah.
I think North Carolina, even though they lost Sam Howell, may be a better overall team. I think their talent level is above what it was on last year's team in an overall perspective. I think Mac Brown is recruited well, and I think that'll show up next year in the ACC. And, I just don't think Clemson walks away with it. And I agree with you. I think there's an opportunity. He's going to give DJU an opportunity. I mean, we've seen it before, as you mentioned, with Burrow and Pickett, guys that come back after a not so great year and show they can do it. But you saw the tape of that spring game. Did that look to you like he's mentally sharp? Did that look to you like he's zoned in? I mean, he couldn't complete a pass against his own team in a no contact spring game. What the hell is he going to do when he's got live bullets flying? I mean, I think he got shook last year with what happened. I think it damaged his confidence, and I think it's going to be hard for him to come back, especially considering there's that kid right behind him who enrolled early, played in the spring game, and is sitting there staring at him on the sidelines going, please screw up, DJ, because I want to get in the game.
You look at his schedule, though. I mean, you're starting off at Mercedes-Benz on September 5th against God Tech. Then you come home the next Saturday against Furman. Then you got to play the weekend after that against La Tech. That's definitely not Murderer's Row. He could build some confidence right there, but then September 24th in Winston-Salem at Wake. And then following that up with home against NC State.
Yeah.
Those
are the two games.
Those are the two games. If they're going to make the move, that's when the move's going to be made. It's going to be made around that time period.
No, those are the two games. That's why I said 4 games. And then boom, because that fourth game is going to be against Wake Forest. And if he doesn't perform there, or if he's shaky, I could see Dabo making the switch before they play NC State, because as we saw last year, NC State gave them all kinds of problems and took them to the overtime and ended up beating them. So it could happen again. And just a couple names that I'd like to throw out there on top of Cade Klubnik, the quarterback, wasn't really the type of recruiting class that we've grown accustomed to seeing from Dabo Swinney. I mean, we've been seeing top 5 recruiting classes over and over and over again. This year, 2022, they finished ranked 14th overall. Yeah. But they got the guy they wanted, and that's Cade Klubnik. So I think Dabo was happy with that. And they got some other guys, too, that hopefully will step in and play right away. One of them that I want to talk about really quickly is the wide receiver. That's Adam Randall. This kid is out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, 6'3", 215. He's got the size. He's a 4-star product. As you see him here going up and getting the ball, I could see this kid coming in and playing some as a freshman. He's from the area. He grew up Clemson fan. He is got all the tools. I mean, he's got the speed, he's got the size, he's got the hands. I could see this kid coming in and competing to get on the field in the beginning of the year. And I've watched a lot of tape on him, and I feel like only a 4-star, but I feel like he's got some 5-star ability to him, if you know what I mean.
I could see Jaden Lucas coming in, getting some early playing time too, and even start probably by the 2nd or 3rd week. Don't you?
I agree. The cornerback out of Malden, South Carolina.
Yeah, I could.
5-star.
He's definitely one of their up and comers for sure.
Yeah, I can see Jaden Lucas definitely competing. They got several defensive backs in this class. They got the safety Sherrod Koval. Out of Chesapeake, Virginia, Oscar Smith High School, 6 feet, 185, 4-star product. They got a linebacker, TJ Dudley, out of Montgomery Prep in Montgomery, Alabama. He could get on the field early. They got Toriano Pride from East St. Louis, Missouri, 4-star cornerback. So these are guys that are going to come in and definitely compete for starting jobs right away. They also picked up a offensive lineman out of Ohio, 4-star, 6'6", 315, Blake Miller out of Strongsville. I think he could come in and maybe not start right away, but definitely improve the depth on that offensive line.
But Hunter Johnson's coming back, baby. Come on.
For the third time.
Hunter Johnson. Third time, yeah. The former 5-star out of Greenwood, Indiana. I remember when he was coming up. Oh, my gosh. It was like so ballyhooed. Then when he transferred to Northwestern, hearing all the hype about how he was going to retransform Northwestern. Wow.
But he was committed to Tennessee first.
He was?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
They were like, oh, yeah, he's number 16. He loves Peyton Manning. He's the next Peyton Manning. And then of course, Tennessee had another coaching change, which they do every 3 years. And so he committed to Clemson and just could never, ever get on the field. But I think Dabo views him more now as like a grad assistant. And I think he's going to lean on him to essentially be a coach since he's been a quarterback in the college football ranks for 6 years. So,
well, Taj Boyd was originally committed to Tennessee as well until the Lane train, picked up and went to LA. So,
yeah, Derek Dooley came in and said that Taj Boyd was not good enough to play at Tennessee. Yeah.
Obviously, Derek Dooley wasn't his father.
Yeah, no. And that's why you don't hire someone based on what their dad did. That doesn't always work out. So anyway, we'll see what happens. But I enjoyed digging in and looking into Clemson today. It's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens down there. As we mentioned, 10-3, not a horrible record, but a lot of those games against some not great competition in the ACC were not good. And I think that's why, even though the record wasn't horrible, but their fans were very, very concerned by the way that some of those games went.
Isn't it crazy how 10-3 can make everybody depressed? Like it almost felt like 6-6.
Yeah, well, it was close to being that. If they didn't have Venables and his defense, that they could have been 6-6 really easily.
I mean, it was just. I mean, heck, they played in the Cheez-It Bowl. You'd have thought they played in the freaking Motor City Bowl the way they acted. Yeah. I mean, it was just, and they played against they beat a good Iowa State team. Against Breece Hall, against Brock Purdy. I mean, they won against a good team. So,
yeah, well, they definitely acted like they won, or Dabo acted like he won the national championship after they won the game. But yeah, you're right. When they were going into it, the fans weren't really excited. But you
got to build for something. You got to build for something. Yeah, I mean, you just can't.
Down year going 10-3, that's pretty good. And the fact that they've got a lot of people coming back this year, and the guys that we mentioned there in the recruiting class, they've got a good shot at making it home. But anyways, we appreciate everybody tuning in today. Definitely go to our YouTube channel, Man Coverage. Type in Man Coverage, Knoxville Nate, Man Coverage, Bonneville. It'll come up right away. You can subscribe to our channel and watch all our shows and see all of our old interviews and everything. We're going to be taking a couple weeks off, but we'll be back as soon as we get done with the little R&R and be bringing you some more college football action.
Hey, when are we getting our own NIL collective to help us out?
I don't know. I'm ready for it. We could pool the Minnesota Gopher collective and then the Vols collective and use both of those pools to fuel our budget.
Absolutely.
I'm thinking. So
absolutely.
We got both locations that we could use to go after. So let's do it. Man Coverage Collective coming to you soon.
All right. It's good to see you, man.
All right, buddy. Have a good one. And thank you for tuning in. Jimmy, thanks for all your great comments. Will, everybody that gave us comments and questions, we appreciate it. We appreciate everybody watching today. And definitely tune in 2 weeks. We will be back on Sunday at 1 o'clock believe that is the second week in June. We would be back coming at you. So come back to us. And thank you all for tuning in today. James, have a great rest of your weekend. All right, bud.
See you then, man.
All right, bud.